What happened to Euphoria? 7 years ago, all anyone could talk about was Euphoria, its visuals, its storylines, its actors. But with the arrival of its long-awaited third season, the tides seem to have turned, and everyone, including the cast, appears to be distancing themselves from the show. And the idea of a fourth season is starting to sound like a nightmare.
So season 4, when do you start shooting?
No.
But how did a series that was once so beloved become so reviled? For those unfamiliar, Euphoria is about a group of teenagers in suburban America navigating addiction, trauma, sex, and violence amidst the usual chaos of high school. The show is technically based on an Israeli drama of the same name from 2012, but beyond a few surface-level character similarities, the two don't really have much in common. If anything, I've always thought it was more similar to Skins, the UK version, not the American one, which I like to pretend never happened. The show centers on Rue Bennett, played by Zendaya, a 17-year-old recovering addict who relapses almost immediately after returning home from rehab. The rest of the cast is made up of her classmates, each dealing with their own assortment of issues. There's Jules, a transgender girl who just moved to town and becomes Rue's closest friend and eventual love interest. Nate, the school's star athlete. Maddie, Nate's on and off girlfriend. Cassie, whose promiscuous reputation precedes her. Lexi, Cassie's little sister and Rue's oldest friend. Kat, who's living a double life as a cam girl. And Fezco, a local drug dealer. Season 1 is largely about Rue's addiction and her relationship with Jules, who is herself struggling with her feelings for Nate. By the time prom rolls around, Kat started dating a boy from school, Cassie has an abortion, Nate and Maddie break up, and Rue eventually relapses. In Season 2, Rue is hiding her drug use from Jules, creating tension in their relationship. After Fezco refuses to sell to her anymore, she gets herself into even more trouble by working for a bigger drug lord, Lori. Meanwhile, Cassie and Nate have been sleeping together, and the eventual reveal effectively ends her friendship with Maddie. Everything comes to a head in the finale after Lexi writes a play about her friend group. The third season picks up 5 years after the events of Season 2, and the time jump was absolutely the right call. Lest we forget how ridiculous it was when Stranger Things tried to make us believe a group of 20-year-olds were playing preteens. The first episode addresses one of last season's biggest unresolved plot points: Rue's debt to Lori. Personally, I would have gotten the hell out of California if I lost a drug dealer's stash, but Rue isn't exactly known for her great decision-making skills. So in order to pay Lori back, Rue becomes a drug mule, eventually getting Faye, an addict introduced in the prior season, to join her. There's a scene where the two of them are swallowing balloons and later purging them, and the entire sequence just feels incredibly degrading, not only to the characters, but to the actresses themselves. The way it's shot is adult video adjacent, with close-ups of them gagging with their hands down their throats, and snot and saliva dripping down their faces. And as if that wasn't humiliating enough, at one point a dog literally licks shit off of Faye's leg. Obviously, the life of a drug mule isn't glamorous, and you could make the argument that director Sam Levenson is trying to show the dark side of addiction, but his actual priority seems to be shock value. The rest of the episode quickly reintroduces us to the other characters. Lexi is working as a production assistant, Maddie is a talent manager, Jules is a sugar baby, Nate is running his dad's construction company, and Cassie is starting up an OnlyFans. That's really all we find out in the first episode, but we can guess that the rest of the season will follow Rue's criminal misadventures and Nate and Cassie's upcoming nuptials. The response to the season premiere has been pretty negative, which can be attributed to a handful of different factors. For one, I think the audience that once gave the show the benefit of the doubt has by this point run out of patience for it. The first season was released in 2019, the second in 2022, and the third in 2026. That's a long time to try and stay relevant. Although the third season was greenlit almost immediately after the second, it struggled to get off the ground, reportedly because Levenson couldn't figure out the direction for the story. That only got worse following the passing of Angus Cloud, who played Fezco, in 2023. And when asked about the series, the other cast members questioned if they'd ever start filming.
And Euphoria, do we know when that's starting to film again? Or
I don't know, do you know?
Sam Levenson actually seems to be the root of a lot of Euphoria's problems, which is quite ironic considering he's its creator. Early on, criticisms were aimed at the show's excessive nudity, and while members of the cast came to his defense, some also mentioned needing to rein him in at times, with Chloe Cherry, Sydney Sweeney, and Minka Kelly all requesting to keep their clothes on for certain scenes. Sure, he didn't kick up a fuss and made the changes, but the fact that those scenes were written that way in the first place says a lot. It's like he thinks female characters are only there to be looked at and not much else. When the show began, the women in it had unique identities, aspirations, and lives, but by the second season, that was already starting to break down, as evidenced by Barbie Ferreira's character, Kat, who basically disappeared, with Ferreira later saying she chose to leave because she felt there was nowhere for her character to go. You can already see the same thing happening with Jules in season 3, not even physically appearing in the first episode. She had all of this depth early on in the show. She wanted to go to college and become a fashion designer. Now she's a sugar baby. And look, I'm not making some puritanical argument that it's sexist to depict a female character as a sex worker, but it's interesting how that direction seems to be Levenson's default. It's like in his world, a woman can only be successful if she's selling herself. Although Cassie was always the character in the most sexual situations, season 3 seems to be taking it to a whole new level. She hasn't evolved in the slightest since high school, still thinking that her body is the only thing she has of value. And the only time she's on screen, she's either naked, crying, or both. The one exception to this rule is Rue, and I don't think that's an accident. Zendaya is one of the biggest actors working today and has been very open about her approach to on-screen nudity, which is to say that she doesn't do it. It seems fair to assume that Rue has been spared from Levenson's gaze because the person playing her has the leverage to make that call. Now, these kinds of shows have always attracted a certain amount of controversy, with people questioning whether it's appropriate to depict teenage characters in these sorts of situations. I've heard people say, why couldn't they just make them college students? But part of what made the early seasons of Euphoria work was how irregular the characters' experiences were. Rue's drug use wasn't being endorsed, with the show making a point of illustrating how it negatively impacted every aspect of her life. Many of the characters' experiences, while still far from ideal, are a lot more commonplace in a college environment, not to mention being teenagers means they're largely exempt from legal repercussions. But now that the characters are older, we're still seeing the same criticisms. So maybe it has less to do with their ages and the direction itself. Whatever you want to say about the first season, there's no denying that Euphoria looked unlike anything else on television. But I think the reason for that is because of something that's only become obvious in hindsight. Sam Levenson wasn't solely responsible for it. Season 1 saw multiple episodes directed by women, including Jennifer Morrison, Pippa Blanco, and Augustine Frizzell. Frizzell was actually responsible for the pilot, meaning the very first impression the show made, both on audiences and on HBO executives, was built on her vision. Sam Levenson just followed that template. This female involvement has become essentially non-existent as the show went on, with Levenson writing and directing every episode of seasons 2 and 3. And it shows, with the female characters becoming more and more one-dimensional, seemingly unable to have a single moment of happiness. The shift in quality might also be because he doesn't have anyone else's notes to copy. In 2023, photographer and director Petra Collins alleged that several years earlier, Levenson had approached her to direct a show he'd written based on her photography. She spent 5 months developing the series, including the casting, before being told she was too young to lead a project of that scale and was dropped. She assumed the project was dead until a year later, when she saw a billboard for the show using the same visuals she had planned, now being credited to Sam Levenson. And this wasn't an isolated incident. For his similarly controversial 2023 series, The Idol, director Amy Seimetz had reportedly completed around 80% of the project before abruptly leaving, allegedly because co-creator The Weeknd felt the show had too much of a female perspective, and Levenson was brought in as her replacement. Imagine being the guy people turn to when they want to make something less appealing to women. The version of The Idol that made it to air was universally panned and cancelled after 1 season, and I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Amy Seimetz had been able to follow through on her vision, because every so often you get a glimpse of it. Levenson might be a competent mimic when it comes to beautiful visuals, but without a woman's perspective adding depth to the work, it comes off as aggressively exploitative, which is definitely how the third season of Euphoria seems to be going. Now, critics are one thing, but the cast themselves seem pretty unhappy with the direction the show has taken. When Euphoria first started, none of them were huge names, but that's certainly changed, with Zendaya, Jacob Elordi, and Sydney Sweeney all starring in some of the most successful films of the past few years. Now, it's tough to say if they're just busy with other obligations, but all three have been very disinterested in promoting the new season, doing what can only be described as the bare minimum of their contractual obligations. This is a pretty stark contrast to how they used to treat the show, especially Zendaya. The series proved that there was more to her than being a Disney darling, even winning the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series for the first and second seasons, becoming the youngest person ever to win in the category. On top of that, she took on a producer credit for season 2, making it clear that this was a project she was invested in professionally and personally. This makes her apparent indifference to season 3 feel less like boredom and more like a deliberate step back. And one has to wonder whether something happened between her and Levenson, because they went from being collaborators to near strangers. She isn't the only one either, with Labyrinth, who is responsible for the score in the first 2 seasons, publicly denouncing Euphoria online. We don't know exactly what went down, but it sounds like a creative dispute that evolved into disrespect. And while his replacement, Hans Zimmer, is certainly no newbie, Labyrinth's sound was just as unique to Euphoria as its visuals were. Only one episode of season 3 has aired so far, so the show could still turn itself around. But I won't lie, I don't have high hopes. What are your thoughts on the third season of Euphoria? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!